The morning in Greenwich dawned earlier than usual. The soft light of the April sun painted the cherry blossoms in the garden of St. Mary's Church a delicate shade of pink. Emma Wilson was about to make the most important vow of her life. Emma, a pediatrician at the city's children's hospital, was a woman who had great strength behind her tender smile. Her way of life, based on honesty and commitment, had earned her the trust of her colleagues. On her days off, nothing made her happier than capturing the smiles of hospitalized children with her camera. Her annual salary of $50,000 reflected her talent and dedication. Her fiancé, David Chan, was a branch manager at a regional IT company, the son of Chinese immigrants who worked tirelessly to support him. David valued family ties above all else. Despite his impressive annual salary of $100,000, his humility and affable nature had earned him the trust of those around him. The couple met at a charity event organized by the hospital. The Wilson family was well known in Greenwich social circles. Practically everyone had heard of them. Her father, Robert Wilson, was president of Wilson Properties, a real estate company with annual sales of $20 million. However, lately he had become more interested in golf than business and was obsessed with social media. His personality, centered on appearances and ostentation, was well known in the business world. Her mother, Margaret, had been a pillar of the local community as a full-time housewife, but over time she had shifted her interest to social media. Now she dedicated herself to her role as an Instagram influencer, where she had 20,000 followers. Her spa visits 3 times a week had become an essential part of her routine. Her obsession with likes was a cause for concern for Emma. Ashley, Emma's sister, had landed the position of CFO at her father's company thanks to nepotism. However, she seemed more interested in managing her social media than her work responsibilities. As an influencer with 100,000 followers, she spent practically her entire monthly salary of $10,000 maintaining her image, a crucial aspect within the Wilson family. Jennifer Anderson had become a key figure as the owner of the largest shopping mall in the region. The Anderson Mall was the most important property for Wilson, one of their most valuable clients, with annual transactions of $10 million and a net worth of $500 million. She always conducted herself with dignity and elegance, and was recognized as a leader in local charitable causes. At the children's hospital where Emma worked, she was especially respected for her generous donations. But most importantly, she had watched Emma grow up since she was a child, as she was a close family friend. 50 people had been invited to the wedding from the father's side, led by the grandparents, who were respected figures in the community. 5 groups of aunts and uncles would also attend, in addition to 8 cousins, all firm believers in the family's tradition. From the mother's side, her grandmother led 3 groups of aunts and uncles with a more liberal mindset, along with 6 cousins. In addition, as influential local personalities, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, 2 medical colleagues from the hospital, 3 groups of business partners and executives, 3 families of childhood friends, as well as the church pastor and his wife were also on the guest list. Just from this list, the high social status of the Wilson family was clear. The budget for the wedding was $100,000, and formal attire had been specified for all attendees. Everything was planned to perfection for this special day. Everyone was looking forward to this spring wedding with the cherry blossoms in full bloom in the chapel of St. Mary's. Emma sat in front of a large mirror completely still. Her pure white wedding dress elegantly highlighted her silhouette. Maria, the professional makeup artist, carefully applied the final touches while Linda, her lifelong friend, gently adjusted the lace veil. From time to time she glanced outside. The morning sun illuminated the cherry blossoms in the church garden, creating a scene worthy of a painting. The petals danced with the breeze, adding a touch of dreaminess to the moment. However, there was still no sign of Margaret or the rest of the family. Linda, with a slight tone of concern in her voice, commented, "Margaret should have arrived by now. She told me she would come early to take photos for her posts. Last night, Mom sent a message saying to take beautiful pictures first thing in the morning, but now not a single word, message or call. It's strange." Emma anxiously looked at her cell phone screen. There was no sign of her parents. Even Ashley's Instagram, which used to be updated every 30 minutes, remained the same since the previous night. Her stories, which normally changed every half hour, remained silent. You're getting a little pale, Maria commented with concern. Her hands continued applying makeup with precision, but lines of worry were visible on her face. She could see how the bride's skin was beginning to turn ashen. At that moment, Sarah, the wedding planner, entered the room with her checklist in hand. I just made the final confirmation with the pastor, she announced, but then noticed the tension in the atmosphere. Where's your family? No one knew what to answer. The heavy silence that filled the room became even denser. Outside, the voices of arriving guests mingled with murmurs. I don't see any of the Wilsons. How strange. The wind carried those whispers to the bridal room. Then Emma's cell phone rang. The name Mom appeared on the screen. All eyes immediately fixed on Emma. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Mom, are you almost at the church? What she heard on the other end of the line was an unexpectedly cheerful voice. In the background, waves crashing on the shore and tropical music could be heard. Oh, Emma, I'm in Hawaii right now. For a moment, Emma couldn't comprehend what she had just heard. It was like a very bad joke. Today is my wedding day. Her mother continued with a carefree laugh. Oh, was it today? We thought a vacation would be more fun. Her sister's mocking laughter was heard in the background. Mom, this beach chair is incredible. The sound of the waves made that laughter sound even more cruel. Emma's hands began to tremble. Her white dress vibrated slightly with the movement. A solitary tear rolled down her cheek, smudging the makeup that Maria had applied so carefully. You're kidding, right? Her voice trembled, and she herself didn't know if it was from anger or sadness. Oh, I'm sorry, her mother replied with disarming lightness. It's Sophie's spring break, so we thought a family trip should be a priority. More laughter from her sister. This angle is perfect for Instagram. I'll send you photos later. The resort is beautiful, my followers will love it. The call ended. Emma's cell phone slipped from her hand and fell onto the carpet with a thud. That sound resonated strongly in her chest. Linda, Maria, and Sarah stood motionless, looking at her in complete silence. How had it come to this? Time marched on relentlessly under the soft morning light. Suddenly, 3 short, firm knocks sounded on the door. It was as if fate itself was calling. Excuse me, Emma. Behind the half-open door, standing with unwavering dignity, was Jennifer Anderson. She held an iPad in her hands, and in her expression, there was a determination that had never been seen before. Mrs. Anderson, why? Emma's voice trembled slightly. It wasn't fear. It was the anticipation of something important that was about to happen. I saw it on social media, Jennifer said. Emma looked down at the iPad screen. There were the smiles of the Wilson family, carefree and radiant, posing on a Hawaiian beach. They laughed as if nothing in the world mattered. As if they hadn't stood up their own daughter on the most important day of her life. Jennifer looked up. Her voice mixed a contained calm with a deep tenderness. 20 years of friendship. I've always cared for you. In her eyes there was more than just empathy. It was certainty, the assurance that only years and experience can give. Today, let me take the place of your family. Emma could no longer contain her tears. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were warm. They were the kind of tears that are shed only when true love touches the heart. Let's post something right now. Jennifer's voice had a serene firmness, the determination of someone who was about to launch a counterattack. Post? What do you mean? Jennifer smiled slightly. Yes, on their social media. But first, let's take a beautiful photo. Jennifer took Emma's hand gently. Her warmth was comforting, as if with that gesture she was trying to fill the void that her family had left. Together they walked to the center of the church and stopped in front of the colorful stained glass windows. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass, enveloping her in multicolored light. The vibrant hues seemed like a blessing from heaven. Let's build new ties, Jennifer said firmly, and at that instant the church bells began to ring. Their peal spread throughout Greenwich, as if announcing the beginning of a new story, as if this day was destined to be something special. Emma silently felt and dried her tears. That morning, for the first time, she began to understand the true meaning of love and family. The guests began to arrive at St. Mary's Church one after another. The spring sun illuminated the church tower, and the stained glass windows projected patterns of color on the stone floor, imbuing the atmosphere with an almost magical light. The first to arrive was Emma's paternal grandfather. His face, marked by deep wrinkles, reflected the dignity of his years. His carefully trimmed white beard gave him an even more imposing air. As he entered with firm steps, adjusting the collar of his morning coat, Jennifer Anderson approached him and quietly explained what had happened. The old man remained silent for a moment. What have they done? His voice trembled, but it was unclear whether it was from anger or sadness. His gaze reflected complex emotions. He had protected the honor of the Wilson family for decades. This was unforgivable. This cannot be forgiven. His words carried the weight of 80 years of experience and dignity. His hand tightened on his cane, and the dry tap against the old wooden floor resonated with contained fury. The next to arrive was her maternal aunt. Her face was even paler than Emma's. She couldn't find words to describe what she felt at the betrayal of her own sister. With glassy eyes, she simply took Emma's hand and squeezed it tightly. There was no need to say anything. The warmth of that hand spoke of genuine family ties, of those that neither distance nor disappointment could break. How could they do something so cruel? Her voice, laden with sadness, reflected the pain of a betrayal she would never have imagined. The relatives arrived one after another. Each time they learned what had happened, they first remained silent, incredulous. Then indignation was reflected on their faces. The medical colleagues from the hospital, normally accustomed to maintaining their composure in the face of life and death, forgot their professionalism for a moment. Fury became evident in their expressions. The executives and business partners, who always kept impassive faces in negotiations, now showed a different severity. They understood the magnitude of what the Wilson family had done. The families of Emma's childhood friends didn't need to say anything. They just hugged her silently. The warmth of those hugs said it all. Memories of a life together, the moments shared since childhood, now united them with even stronger bonds. In the church garden, the cherry blossoms began to release their petals. The scene was so beautiful, so ethereal, that it seemed like something out of a dream. And yet what was happening was real. The time for the ceremony approached. The atmosphere in the old church became solemn, charged with emotions that didn't need words to be felt in the air. The pastor approached silently and in a serene voice, offered words of blessing. His presence commanded respect. He had officiated many weddings in that church for more than 40 years. Your wedding today will be pleasing in the eyes of God, because it is surrounded by the true love of all the people present here. Sometimes God tests us, but beyond those tests awaits a deeper love. Emma and David stood in the center of the chapel. The light that passed through the stained glass enveloped them gently, as if heaven itself was blessing them. All the guests looked at them with contained emotion. Their gazes reflected love and determination. The pastor's voice resonated strongly in the church. The echo of his words seemed to shake the old beams of the temple and reach the depths of the hearts of those present. David took Emma's hand firmly but tenderly. What they felt for each other was better conveyed with that simple gesture than with any words. Emma. Her voice was laden with sincere affection. I promise to you that even though we are not united by blood, we will become a new family, and together with all the people gathered here, we will cultivate ties that will last forever. There was a moment of profound silence. Today, in front of everyone who accompanies us at this moment, we are going to write a new family history. Bright tears fell from Emma's eyes. But unlike that morning, these were not tears of sadness, they were tears of happiness. The small drops rolled down her cheeks and slightly stained her wedding dress, shining like witnesses to a new hope. After the ceremony, the guests gathered at the reception venue. Something different could be felt in the atmosphere. There was a deep unity, a bond that went beyond blood. The expressions of the attendees had changed. They no longer reflected only anger and sadness but a renewed determination. Emma's paternal grandfather stood up slowly. The place fell absolutely silent. With a glass in hand, his presence emanated dignity. He was like an imposing statue, with the wisdom of years reflected in his bearing. Today I feel the deepest anger of my life and at the same time the most intense emotion, he said in a voice that defied his age. Each of his words contained the weight of a lifetime, decades of business experience, the respect earned over the years, and the responsibility of being the patriarch of the Wilson family were present in every syllable. The parents and sister of my granddaughter did not come to her wedding. This can never be forgiven. He paused. In the history of the Wilson family, there has never been a disgrace like this. The silence that followed was overwhelming. The air was dense, heavy, but at the same time powerful. However, the old man looked around, observing the faces of those who were there. He sighed deeply and with absolute conviction added, "But witnessing the love of all those gathered here today, I am convinced of something. True family is not just about blood. But this kind of mutual care and support is the true test of what it means to be family." Jennifer Anderson stood up silently. Her presence commanded respect. It was the perfect combination of the dignity of a successful businesswoman and the maternal affection of a mother. "I have a proposal for everyone," she said firmly. The atmosphere in the room became even more tense. All eyes turned to her. Now we are united by new ties. How about we shape those ties in the place they value most? Social media. Emma's maternal aunt stood up, wiping her tears. Her hands were still shaking. "Surely there is something we can all do together," she murmured. "Let's transform our anger and sadness towards my sister into love for our new family." One by one, the guests began to voice their opinions. But these were not simply expressions of anger or disappointment. They were constructive proposals, full of determination and willingness. Naturally, the conversation led them to form a large circle. 50 people joined hands. The circle was perfect, as if symbolizing the new family ties that were being born. "Let's unite our strength as the new family we are," Jennifer said firmly. Her words were imbued with emotion. The hope of a new story about to be written could be felt. David squeezed Emma's hand tightly. Through that silent grip, he conveyed everything he felt. "Everyone who came to our wedding today is our true family," he said with conviction. "We want to start our new life alongside you, who chose the bonds of the heart over the bonds of blood." All the guests nodded and, holding hands, made a silent vow. Just at that moment, the church bells began to ring. It was a pure sound, as if blessing the birth of these new bonds. The peal of the bells resonated throughout Greenwich, as if announcing that this was a special day. Jennifer took out her smartphone without saying a word. Her expression was serene, but determination was visible in her eyes. The counterattack was about to begin. In a matter of seconds, Emma's post was launched into the world of social media. A single photo taken in front of the church's stained glass windows, with the spring sunlight illuminating her from behind. Emma, in her wedding dress, standing next to Jennifer Anderson, radiating dignity. Their expressions conveyed deep affection and impenetrable calm. Below the image, Emma's message began to unfold. "I want to introduce you to today's special guest, Mrs. Jennifer Anderson, owner of Anderson Mall. She has been a family friend for 20 years and has always looked out for me since I was a child." The post appeared in real time on the reception menu screen. The guests read it with great anticipation. Emma took a breath and wrote the next line. "This morning I received a call from my mother telling me she would not be coming to my wedding. On my wedding day, my entire family canceled the most important day of my life because Hawaii seemed more fun to them." A few small laughs escaped among those present, but they were not of mockery or sadness. They seemed to anticipate what was about to happen. In the midst of it all, Mrs. Anderson rushed to me and said firmly, "We cannot let your new life begin this way." Mrs. Anderson, who supports me with more warmth than my own family, while my father, mother, and sister chose a vacation in Hawaii, is teaching me what it means to be a true adult. Within minutes of the message, reactions began to flood the network. First came responses from the local community, then comments from the business world. More voices from different social circles rose and spread throughout all networks. An emergency meeting was held at the reception venue. "Let's decide how to proceed from here," said Jennifer Anderson firmly. "The economic impact is inevitable," commented one of the executive business partners seriously. "The share price of Wilson property is already falling drastically. The market seems to be questioning Robert Wilson's management ability." An uncle who was a lawyer spoke softly. "From a legal standpoint, there are several options. First, damages for breach of the wedding contract. Then the possibility of a derivative lawsuit from shareholders for damage to the company's reputation." But Emma shook her head. "This is not about money. All I wanted was the love of my family, The place fell completely silent. Her grandfather stood up slowly. His presence carried the weight of the Wilsons' history and tradition. "This is the right decision," he said solemnly. "For the honor and pride of our family." Everyone nodded silently. Then they took one last photo together. The guests formed a large circle around the bride and groom. There were no longer doubts on their faces. The ties of this new family were now stronger than ever. And that union was clearly captured in the image. At the photographer's signal, the shutter clicked. Just at that moment, the church bells rang loudly. The photo was published. It was a solemn declaration signed by 50 names. "Today we, the extended family, declare the complete severing of ties with Robert Wilson, Margaret Wilson and Ashley Wilson, who have trampled on family ties and broken the most important promise. From this moment on, relations between the Wilson and Chan families are officially terminated." The instant the post was completed, the spring sunset illuminated the church's stained glass windows. The colored light spread throughout the place as if blessing the birth of this new family. Emma squeezed David's hand tightly. No more tears flowed from her eyes. There was no longer sadness, only a firm resolve for the life that was about to begin. Outside the window, the cherry blossom petals danced under the golden light of sunset, as if bidding farewell to the old ties and celebrating the birth of new ones. Evening fell quietly over Greenwich. However, the news continued to spread like a stone thrown into water. Its impact generated waves that reached both the digital and real worlds. A year later, Greenwich received another spring. The cherry blossoms in the garden of St. Mary's Church bloomed with the same beauty as the previous year. But many things had changed in that time. The wedding incident had gone viral across the United States. Social media spread it widely, and major media outlets covered it extensively. It became a social phenomenon. They called it the fall of a social media-addicted family, and pointed to it as a warning to modern society. The Wilsons' fall was swift, too swift. Robert Wilson lost his contract with Anderson Mall immediately. That meant losing $10 million in annual transactions. Soon after, other business partners began to break their contracts as well. "We cannot trust a man who is not even capable of keeping his family together." That phrase became an unspoken rule in the business world. 6 months later, Wilson Properties stock plummeted to its lowest point since the company's inception. Pursued by shareholders for his mismanagement, Robert Wilson had no choice but to resign as president. Nowadays, he only runs a small real estate business. Margaret Wilson's decline was even more abrupt. The post she made on the wedding day caused a storm on Instagram. She was harshly criticized by her followers. Within hours, her account was suspended, expelled from the social circles in which she had moved her entire life. Her world collapsed in an instant. The relationship she had built over the years disappeared. Without her social circle, without the company's money, she could no longer continue paying for her spa treatments 3 times a week. Now she sighs every time she looks in the mirror. Diagnosed with depression, she spends her days shut up at home. Ashley Wilson, her sister, didn't fare any better either. She had to abandon her career as an influencer. The label of influencer who betrayed her family was lethal in the world of social media. In a week, she lost almost all of her followers. The brands that sponsored her broke their contracts, and without her position as CFO at her father's company, she had no choice but to look for another job. Now she works part-time in a small cafe. Ironically, she ended up in the kind of job she had always despised. But while some ties were broken, others became stronger. Last month, Emma and David announced that they were expecting their first baby. The post received more than 100,000 likes and was filled with congratulatory comments. Of course, Jennifer Anderson proudly accepted her role as godmother. "I've received the best role of my life." Her words were full of emotion. Genuine affection enveloped Emma's life. Her career at the hospital had become more rewarding than ever. Her love for children's photography had given rise to a special section on the hospital's social media called Today's Smile. Each image captured the joy of the young patients and touched thousands of people. Every Sunday, the whole new family gathered for dinner. It had become a beautiful tradition to share a warm moment at Jennifer Anderson's mansion. "We have become a true family beyond blood ties." Every time the grandfather uttered these words at dinner, everyone felt moved. Every month they took new family photos. But these were not for social media. They were just for them to keep the most precious memories. The smiles in those photos reflected genuine happiness. Recently, the 50 people who made up this large family gathered again at St. Mary's Church. It was the first wedding anniversary mass. The pastor, who had witnessed all the changes of the past year, offered some special words of blessing. A true family is built with hearts that care for and support each other. You have shown us the most beautiful way to do it. Emma nodded silently and placed a hand on her belly, where a new life was growing. I want to teach this child what a true family means. David embraced her while the warm smiles of his new family spread around him. Sometimes the story of their wedding still appeared on social media, but it no longer spoke of sadness. It had become a testament to love and strength, a silent but powerful lesson, a reminder that true family is not always blood but the one chosen with the heart. In the church garden, the spring breeze lifted the cherry blossom petals. The scene was as beautiful as the previous year, but its meaning had changed. Now it seemed to be blessing the bonds of the new family.